people walk into a room and before they say a single word, before they hand you a business card, before they tell you their title or where they went to school, you already know something about them. You can feel it. There's something being communicated that has nothing to do with words, nothing to do with credentials, nothing to do with the suit they're wearing or the car they pulled up in. What you're picking up on is the invisible resume, the one that never gets printed on paper but gets read by every single person they come across. Now here's what's interesting. We spend so much of our lives polishing the visible resume. We go to school, we get the degree, we list our accomplishments, we carefully arrange our work history so it looks good on paper. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Education matters, skills matter, experience matters. But I'll tell you what matters more than all of it put together, and that's what you are when nobody's checking your references. The invisible resume is the one that tells the truth. The paper resume tells people what you've done. The invisible resume tells people who you are. And I'm telling you, people might glance at the paper, but they study the person. You see, character comes before reputation. That's a phrase worth writing down and sitting with for a while. Character is what you are. Reputation is what people think you are. Now, sometimes those two things line up. And when they do, you've got something powerful working for you. But sometimes they don't. And when that happens, it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out. You can manage a reputation for a while, polish it up, put a nice frame around it, hang it on the wall for people to admire. But character, real character, doesn't need a frame. It doesn't need managing. It just is. And eventually, what you truly are will shine through every effort you've ever made to look like something else. Think about the people you've known who had wonderful reputations but questionable character. Maybe you worked with someone like that. Everyone on the outside thought the world of them. They had the right handshake, the right smile, the right words for every situation. But you knew something different because you saw them behind closed doors. You saw what they did when there was no audience, when there was no reward for being on their best behavior, when nobody was writing about them in the company newsletter. And what did you find? You found that the invisible resume told a very different story than the one they were handing out at networking events. Now here's where this becomes practical and not just philosophical. When you go through life, you are being read constantly. Not your paper, not your credentials, you. Your family reads you every single day. Your children don't listen to what you say nearly as much as they watch what you do. Your spouse doesn't remember the promises you made as much as they remember the promises you kept. Your neighbors, your coworkers, the person you do business with at the bank, the clerk at the grocery store, every single one of them is picking up on your invisible resume, whether you realize it or not. And the question becomes, what does yours say? I'll tell you a little truth that most people don't want to hear. What you are speaks so loudly that people can barely hear what you're saying. You can give the greatest speech in the world about integrity, but if you cheat on the small things when you think no one is looking, your speech means nothing. You can talk all day about loyalty, but if you gossip about your closest friends the moment they leave the room, your talk is just noise. The invisible resume is not written in ink. It's written in action. It's written in the 1,000 small choices you make every single week that nobody sees, but everybody eventually feels. Now let's talk about something that happens in the working world, because this is where the invisible resume really shows its power. Employers hire skills. That's what the interview is for. That's what the paper resume is for, to find out if you can do the job. Can you type fast enough? Can you run the software? Can you manage a team? Can you close a sale? Those are skills, and they'll get you through the door. But here's the key. Employers hire skills, but they promote character. Have you ever wondered why some people with extraordinary ability seem to get stuck at the same level year after year? They can do the work better than anyone else in the building, but they never move up. Meanwhile, someone with less raw talent, less flash, less dazzle keeps climbing. Why? Because the people making those decisions are reading the invisible resume. They're looking at who shows up on time, not because the boss is watching, but because that's just who they are. They're looking at who keeps their word when it's inconvenient. They're looking at who takes responsibility when something goes wrong, instead of pointing fingers and looking for someone to blame. Let me put it to you another way. Skills will get you hired. Character will get you trusted. And trust is the currency that opens every door that a paper resume cannot. Think about that for a second. Trust. When someone trusts you, they don't need to check up on you. They don't need to micromanage you. They don't need to wonder if you're going to follow through. Trust is what happens when your invisible resume has been consistent for so long that people stop questioning it and start relying on it. And when people start relying on you, not just your ability, but you as a person, that is when your life begins to change in ways that no certification, no diploma, no job title could ever produce. Now I want to talk about strangers for a moment, because this is another place where the invisible resume does its work. When you meet someone for the first time, what's happening? They're looking at your face, yes. They're listening to your voice. They're watching your body language. But underneath all of that surface level stuff, something deeper is going on. They're trying to figure out if they can trust you, and they're not doing it consciously most of the time. It's instinct. It's the gut feeling that tells you whether someone is safe to do business with, whether someone is worth following, whether someone is the kind of person you want in your life. Strangers may trust faces at first, but they follow character. The face gets the introduction. The character gets the relationship. And this is why the invisible resume is so much more valuable than anything you could ever print on paper. Because paper can be fabricated. Paper can be exaggerated. Paper can be designed to impress. But the invisible resume has to be lived. You can't fake it for long. You can put on a show for a week, maybe a month, maybe even a year if you're really committed to it. But eventually the invisible resume reveals itself because it's built from the accumulation of who you truly are. Day after day, decision after decision, year after year. It's the most honest document you'll ever carry, and it's the one that everybody reads. So here's the question I want you to sit with. If someone could read your invisible resume right now, not the one you wish you had, not the one you're planning to build someday, but the one you're carrying today, what would it say? Would it say that you're a person of consistency? Would it say that you keep your promises? Would it say that you treat people with respect even when there's nothing in it for you? Would it say that you do the right thing when nobody's watching, when there's no applause, when there's no reward? Because that is the resume that matters. That is the resume that opens doors no application ever could. The paper gets you in the lobby. The invisible resume gets you into the room where the real decisions are made. And if you understand that, if you truly get that, then you know exactly where to start investing your time and energy. Not in polishing the paper, but in building the person. Let me leave you with this thought before we go any further. Every morning when you wake up, you are adding another line to your invisible resume. Every interaction, every conversation, every moment of discipline or laziness, every act of kindness or carelessness, it all goes on the record. Not the record that sits in a filing cabinet somewhere, but the record that people carry in their memory of you. The record that your children will talk about when they're grown. The record that your grandchildren will hear stories about long after you're gone. The question is never whether the invisible resume exists. It does. The only question is what you're writing on it today. Now, this might bother a few people in this room, but I think you're ready to hear it. Talent is one of the most overrated things in the world today. Now, before you push back on that, let me explain what I mean. I'm not saying talent doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Talent is a gift, and it's a beautiful thing to watch someone use a genuine talent. But here's the problem. We've built an entire culture that worships talent as if it were the final answer, as if having talent were enough to guarantee a successful life. And the evidence all around us says otherwise. Look around at the people you know. Look at the people you grew up with, the people you went to school with, the people you've worked alongside. How many of them were gifted? How many of them had something special, something that made you say, that person is really going to go somewhere? Now ask yourself the harder question, how many of them actually went there? The answer, if you're being honest, is not many. And that should bother us. It should make us stop and ask why. Why do gifted people stall out? Why do people with extraordinary ability end up living ordinary lives? Why does the person with all the potential in the world end up stuck in the same spot 10 years later, still talking about what they're going to do someday? The answer isn't complicated, but it is uncomfortable. They stalled out not because they lacked ability, but because they lacked the inner architecture to sustain what their ability could build. Talent can start something. Talent can open a door, get attention, create a spark. But talent alone cannot sustain anything. Talent without structure is like a fire without a fireplace. It burns bright for a moment, and then it burns the house down. Now, what do I mean by inner architecture? I mean the framework of habits, disciplines, and values that hold a life together when things get difficult. I mean the ability to show up on the days you don't feel like showing up. I mean the willingness to do the boring, repetitive, unglamorous work that nobody applauds but everybody benefits from. I mean the strength to say no to a shortcut when the shortcut would be so easy, so convenient, so tempting. That is inner architecture. That is the structure that talent needs in order to become something lasting. And without it, talent is just a party trick, impressive for a few minutes but useless over the long haul. Think about this carefully. A person with character and average talent will outperform a genius with no character almost every time. Now that sounds like it shouldn't be true, doesn't it? We've been taught to believe that the smartest, the most gifted, the most naturally talented person should always win. But that's not how life works. Life rewards consistency. Life rewards follow-through. Life rewards the person who can be counted on to deliver day after day. Not just on the days when inspiration shows up, but on the days when it doesn't. The person with average talent and strong character builds slowly, steadily, brick by brick. They don't make headlines. They don't dazzle anyone at the dinner party. But 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, they've built something real, something solid, something that lasts. Meanwhile, the genius with no character has started 12 things and finished none of them. And here's what's sad about it. The talented person who stalls out usually knows they're stalling. That's the cruelty of it. They can see their own potential sitting there unused, like a brand new set of tools still in the box. They know what they could do, what they should do, what they were designed to do. But knowing and doing are separated by a canyon. And the only bridge across that canyon is discipline. Not motivation, discipline. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go like the weather. You can't build a life on feelings. You can't build a career on the days when you feel like working. You've got to build it on the days when you'd rather stay in bed, when you'd rather watch TV, when you'd rather do anything in the world besides the hard, unglamorous, necessary work of becoming who you're capable of becoming. Here's how this plays out in real life. Take two people starting a business at the same time. One of them is brilliant, creative, quick thinking, full of ideas that would make your head spin. The other one is solid, not flashy, not the smartest person in the room, but reliable, steady, and fiercely disciplined about the basics. Who do you think is still in business 5 years from now? I'll tell you who. It's the steady one, because the brilliant one got bored. The brilliant one got distracted by the next big idea before the first one had time to take root. The brilliant one couldn't be bothered with bookkeeping and customer follow-up and the 1,000 little details that keep a business alive because those things weren't exciting enough for someone of their ability. Meanwhile, the steady one kept the books, returned every phone call, followed up with every customer, and built a reputation one honest transaction at a time. Talent started the engine, but character kept fuel in the tank. And an engine without fuel, no matter how powerful it is, isn't going anywhere. Now, I want to be really clear about something. I am not against talent. I am not telling you to ignore your gifts or pretend they don't matter. What I am telling you is that talent is a starting point, not a destination. Talent is the seed, not the harvest. And between the seed and the harvest, there is a tremendous amount of work that has nothing to do with talent and everything to do with character. There's the work of watering the seed. There's the work of pulling the weeds. There's the work of protecting the soil. There's the work of being patient when nothing seems to be growing, when the ground looks bare, and you start to wonder if anything is even happening. That is the work that talent alone will never do. That is the work that requires something deeper, something stronger, something that doesn't depend on how gifted you are, but on how committed you are. Here's another way to look at it. Talent determines what you can do. Character determines what you will do. And in the long run, what you will do matters infinitely more than what you can do. The world is full of people who can do remarkable things. The world is not full of people who will do the unremarkable things that make remarkable outcomes possible. Anybody can dream big. Anybody can make a plan on a napkin and feel excited about the future for an evening. But who's going to wake up tomorrow morning and start executing that plan? Who's going to keep going next week when the excitement wears off? Who's going to keep at it next month when the obstacles show up? Who's going to keep at it next year when everybody else has moved on to the next shiny idea? The person with character, that's who. The person who made a decision and refuses to renegotiate that decision every time it gets hard. I'm telling you, here's what happens to talent when it has no structure underneath it. It becomes a source of frustration instead of a source of fulfillment. The gifted person who never develops discipline doesn't just hit a wall, they suffer. They suffer because they can see the gap between where they are and where they know they should be. They suffer because other people keep reminding them of their potential, which only makes the gap more painful. You're so talented, people say. You could do anything you want. And every time they hear it, it stings a little more because they know the truth. They know that having the ability to do something and actually doing it are two completely different things. Potential is not an achievement. Potential is a promissory note. And if you never cash it in, it becomes the heaviest burden you'll ever carry. So what's the lesson in all of this? The lesson is simple but not easy. Stop relying on your talent to save you. Stop waiting for your gifts to carry you where you want to go. Your talent will get you noticed, but it won't get you there. Your character will get you there. Your discipline will get you there. Your willingness to do what's required, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when nobody's watching, that's what will get you there. Start building the inner architecture. Start putting together the framework of habits and disciplines and values that will hold your talent up instead of letting it collapse under its own weight. Because talent without character is a beautiful building with no foundation. And I don't care how beautiful the building is. If the foundation isn't there, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing comes down. So here's what I want you to ask yourself today. Are you living off your talent, or are you building with your character? Because if you're living off your talent, you're spending capital that will eventually run out. Talent is like a savings account with no new deposits. You can draw from it for a while, but eventually the balance hits zero. Character, on the other hand, is a daily investment. It grows with every disciplined choice, every kept promise, every moment of integrity. It compounds over time like interest, quietly building in the background until one day you look up and realize you've built something no amount of raw talent could have built on its own. The question is not whether you were born gifted. Plenty of people are born gifted. The question is whether you're willing to do the work that talent alone will never do. That is the question that separates those who almost made it from those who actually did. Let me paint a picture for you that I think will change how you approach your entire life if you let it. Most people wake up every morning and go chasing. They chase money. They chase opportunities. They chase clients. They chase promotions. They chase deals. They spend their whole lives running after things, reaching for things, grabbing at things, and they can't figure out why those things always seem to stay just out of reach. It's exhausting, isn't it? This constant pursuit, this endless hustle of trying to track down the next opportunity before somebody else gets to it first. And I'm not here to tell you that hard work doesn't matter, because it does. Effort matters. Showing up matters. But here's what I want you to think about. What if the problem isn't that you're not chasing hard enough? What if the problem is that you're chasing it all? You see, there's a principle at work in life that most people never discover, and it's this. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. Let that sit for a second. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. Wanting something has very little to do with whether it actually shows up in your life. Everybody wants more. Everybody wants better. Wanting is the cheapest activity in the world because it requires nothing of you. But becoming, now that's a different story entirely. When you become the kind of person that opportunity is looking for, you don't have to chase it anymore. It starts looking for you. That's not magic. That's not wishful thinking. And that's not some fairy tale to make you feel good. That is a law, just as real as gravity. And it works whether you believe in it or not. Now, I want you to think about integrity for a moment. Not as a word you put on a motivational poster, but as a practice, as a way of living. Integrity means you do what you said you were going to do. It means your word and your action are the same thing. It means that when you shake someone's hand and make an agreement, that agreement is settled. Not because of a contract, not because of a lawyer, but because of who you are. Now, when you live that way consistently, what do you think happens? People start talking about you. Not because you asked them to, not because you ran some advertising campaign about how trustworthy you are, but because your behavior has spoken for you in a way that no ad ever could. And when people start talking about your integrity, other people start listening, and those people start seeking you out. They want to do business with you. They want to partner with you. They want to be around you. That is the magnetic quality of character at work, and you didn't have to chase a single one of them. Now let me add another layer to this: consistency. Consistency is one of the most underrated qualities a person can develop, and it is one of the most magnetic. You know why? Because most people are inconsistent. Most people are fired up one day and checked out the next. Most people are excited on Monday and done by Wednesday. Most people make promises in January that they've already broken by February. So when someone shows up who is consistent, not perfect, not flawless, but consistent, it stands out like a lighthouse in a storm. People are drawn to consistency because consistency is rare, and rare things are valuable. When you are the same person on Friday that you were on Monday, when you deliver the same quality of work in December that you delivered in March, when your mood and your ethics and your effort level don't swing with the weather, you become someone that people can build around. And when people realize they can build around you, they start bringing their best opportunities to your door. And then there's reliability, which is the quiet cousin of consistency. Reliability doesn't make a lot of noise. It doesn't show up with fireworks and fanfare. Reliability just shows up. That's its entire resume. It shows up. It shows up on time. It shows up prepared. It shows up when it's raining and when it's cold and when nobody else bothered to come. And over time, that simple act of showing up becomes the most powerful statement you can make about who you are. Because in a world where everybody's making promises and half the people aren't keeping them, the person who simply does what they said they'd do becomes extraordinary by default. You don't have to be the most talented. You don't have to be the most creative. You don't have to be the loudest or the flashiest. You just have to be there when you said you'd be there, doing what you said you'd do. That alone will set you apart from the majority of people you'll ever go up against. Now here's where this gets really exciting. When you combine integrity, consistency, and reliability into a single life, When those three qualities become the foundation of who you are and how you operate, you create what I call a gravitational pull. Just like the planets are held in orbit by gravity, the right people, the right deals, and the right circumstances are pulled toward a person of character by a force that is just as real and just as predictable. It's not random. It's not luck. It's not being in the right place at the right time. It's being the right person and letting the place and the time take care of themselves. The right people don't show up in your life by accident. They show up because something about who you are connected with something about who they are. And the wrong people? They tend to drift away on their own because your character creates an environment that doesn't work for them. That's the beauty of it. You don't just attract the right things, you naturally push away the wrong ones. Tell me, have you ever met someone who seemed to attract good things without even trying? It seemed like every time you turned around, they had a new opportunity, a new connection, a new door opening. And maybe you thought, well, they're just lucky. Maybe you thought, well, they know the right people. Maybe you even thought, well, it's easy for them. But let me challenge that, because I believe if you looked more closely at that person's life, you would find something very different from luck. You would find someone who spent years developing themselves. You would find someone who read the books, went to the seminars, practiced the disciplines, guarded their integrity, kept their promises, and invested in their own growth when nobody was paying them to do it. The luck you're seeing is the harvest of seeds that were planted long before you started watching. You're seeing the result, but you didn't see the work. And the work is where the magnetism comes from. This brings me to something that I believe is one of the most important ideas a person can ever take hold of. And it is this: work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Now that might sound strange at first. Most people spend the bulk of their energy working on their jobs, working on their businesses, working on their careers. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. You should work hard at what you do. But if that's where all your energy goes, you're making a big mistake. Because your income, your opportunities, your relationships, and your quality of life are not determined mainly by what you do at work. They're determined mainly by what you become as a person. Your job pays you for your time and your skill, but your personal development pays you for the rest of your life. When you grow as a person, everything around you grows. Your conversations get better. Your decisions get sharper. Your relationships get deeper. Your ability to see and grab hold of opportunity gets stronger. Everything changes, not because the world changed, but because you did. Think about it this way. If you spend all your time working on your job, you'll make a living. But if you spend time working on yourself, you'll make a fortune. And I don't just mean money, although that's part of it. I mean a fortune of rich relationships, a fortune of wisdom, a fortune of confidence, a fortune of inner peace that doesn't depend on whether the economy is up or down, or whether your boss is in a good mood or a bad one. When you invest in yourself, in your mind, in your character, in your discipline, in your ability to communicate and connect and lead, you become the kind of person that the world wants to invest in. And when the world starts investing in you, opportunities show up that you never could have created on your own. Here's what most people miss. They think the path to a better life runs through better circumstances. If I could just get the better job, the better location, the better break, then my life would improve. But that's backwards. The path to a better life runs through a better you. The circumstances don't shape the person shapes the circumstances. Put a person of character in a difficult environment and watch what happens. They don't complain about the environment. They get to work changing it. They bring their integrity into it. They bring their consistency into it. They bring their reliability into it. And before long, the environment starts to shift. Not because the environment decided to cooperate, but because the person inside it refused to be defined by it. That is the attraction principle in action. You become the magnet, and the world rearranges itself around you. So let's bring this back to where we started. Stop chasing. I know that's hard to hear for some of you because chasing feels productive. It feels like you're doing something. But chasing is exhausting, and it puts the power in the hands of whatever you're chasing instead of keeping the power where it belongs, inside of you. Instead of chasing opportunities, become the kind of person opportunities can't ignore. Instead of chasing the right people, become the kind of person the right people are looking for. Instead of chasing success, become successful in your habits, in your thinking, in your character, and let the external results catch up to the internal reality. That is how this works. It has always worked this way. The people who figured it out didn't just change their strategies, they changed themselves. And when they changed themselves, everything else followed. Not overnight, not without effort, not without patience, but inevitably. Because when you build the magnet, what's meant to be attracted to you will find its way. You don't have to go looking for it. You just have to become ready to receive it. Let me talk to you about something that nobody likes to discuss, but everybody needs to hear. Pressure, adversity. The moments in life when everything that could go wrong decides to go wrong all at once. Like the universe held a meeting and agreed to test you on the same day. We've all had those moments. We've all had that Thursday night when the phone rings with bad news, when the deal falls apart, when the person you counted on lets you down, when the money runs out before the month does. And in those moments, something very interesting happens, something that reveals more about you than any success ever could. Because anybody can have character on a sunny Tuesday when the bills are paid, the family is happy, and the future looks bright. That's easy. That doesn't prove anything. The real measure of who you are shows up when the sky goes dark and the ground starts shaking beneath your feet. Now, here's the part that most people get wrong. Most people believe that pressure builds character. You hear that all the time, right? Tough times build character. It sounds nice and there's a tiny bit of truth in it, but it's mostly wrong. Pressure does not build character. Pressure reveals character. There's a big difference between those two ideas, and if you miss it, you'll spend your whole life misunderstanding why you respond to crisis the way you do. When the hard times come, and they will come, make no mistake about that, what comes out of you is not something that was created in that moment. What comes out of you is something that was already in there. The crisis just squeezed it to the surface. It's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. Whatever's inside the tube is what comes out. You don't squeeze a tube and get something that wasn't already in there. If there's patience inside you, pressure will bring patience out. If there's anger inside you, pressure will bring anger out. If there's integrity inside you, it will show up when you need it most. And if it's not inside you, no amount of wishing will make it appear in the moment you need it. This is why crisis doesn't create who you are. It exposes who you've been becoming. And that word becoming is the key to the whole thing. Who you've been becoming in the quiet, ordinary, unremarkable days of your life is exactly who you will be in the loud, chaotic, overwhelming days. There's no switch you can flip. There's no reserve tank of character you can tap into when things get hard. What you have is what you've been building, and what you haven't been building simply won't be there. I've watched people go through incredible hardship, and some of them come through it with grace and strength and composure that takes your breath away. And I've watched other people go through the same kind of hardship, and they fall apart completely. Same circumstances, completely different responses. And the difference is never about the circumstances. The difference is always about what was inside the person before the circumstances showed up. Imagine two houses sitting side by side and a terrible storm rolls in. Same wind, same rain, same lightning, same everything. The storm doesn't pick favorites. It hits both houses with equal force. When the storm passes, one house is still standing, solid and intact. The other one is in pieces, scattered across the yard. Now, did the storm build the strong house? Of course not. The strong house was built long before the storm ever showed up. The foundation was poured on a calm day. The walls were raised on an ordinary afternoon. The roof was secured when the sun was shining, and nobody was thinking about storms. The storm didn't make that house strong. The storm proved that the house was strong. And the house that fell apart, the storm didn't make it weak. The storm proved that it was weak, that corners had been cut, that the foundation was shallow, that the materials were cheap. The storm just revealed what was already true about both structures. Your life works the same way. The storms of life, the financial setbacks, the health scares, the broken relationships, the betrayals, the losses, they are not building your character. They are revealing the character you've already built or failed to build. And that is either a terrifying thought or a freeing one, depending on how you've been spending your ordinary days. If you've been investing in your character during the calm seasons, if you've been developing discipline and patience and resilience when nobody was requiring it of you, then the storm is simply your chance to show what you're made of. But if you've been coasting, if you've been cutting corners, if you've been telling yourself that you'll get serious about personal growth someday, then the storm is going to expose every crack you've been pretending wasn't there. Now let's talk about what this means in real, everyday terms. The habits you set in private become the strength you display in public. Let me say that again because it might be the most important sentence in this entire talk. The habits you set in private become the strength you display in public. What you do when nobody is watching is the rehearsal for what you'll do when everybody is watching. If you practice discipline in the small things, getting up on time, keeping your word on the little promises, managing your money carefully when there's not much of it, controlling your temper when the stakes are low, then when the big moment comes, when the spotlight is on and the pressure is crushing, you will have something to draw from. You'll have a reservoir of strength that was filled drop by drop, day by day, in the privacy of your own life. But if your private life is a mess, if you cut corners when nobody's looking, if you break small promises because you think they don't matter, if you let your discipline slide every time it gets uncomfortable, then you are building a reservoir of weakness. And when the pressure comes, that's what will pour out. Not because you're a bad person, not because you don't want to be strong, but because you haven't practiced being strong. Strength is not something you summon on command. It's something you develop through repetition. The same way a musician develops the ability to play a difficult piece. The musician doesn't walk on stage and suddenly pick up the skill to play the concerto. The musician spent months in a practice room, playing the same passages over and over until they became second nature. And when they walk on stage and the lights are bright and the audience is watching, their fingers know what to do because they've done it 1,000 times before in private. That is how character works under pressure. Your public performance is always a reflection of your private practice. I want to challenge a belief that many people carry around without even realizing it. The belief goes something like this: when the big moment comes, I'll rise to the occasion. People love to tell themselves that. They believe that somehow, when life demands greatness from them, they'll find it within themselves, even if they haven't been building it. And I get why that belief is attractive. It lets you off the hook for today. It says you don't need to do the hard work of preparation because some future version of yourself will magically show up and handle everything. But that's a fantasy, and it's a dangerous one. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your preparation. Whatever you have practiced, whatever you have repeated, whatever you have made habitual, that is the level you will perform at when the heat is on. Not higher, not lower, right there. So the question becomes, what are you practicing? Not what are you planning to practice, not what do you intend to practice someday when life settles down and you have more time. What are you practicing right now, today, in the ordinary moments of your life? Are you practicing patience or are you practicing impatience? Are you practicing gratitude or are you practicing complaint? Are you practicing self-control or are you practicing indulgence? Are you practicing honesty in the small conversations or are you practicing small deceptions that you tell yourself don't really count? Every single day, you are practicing something. every single day, you are filling your reservoir with something. And whatever you're putting in there is exactly what's going to come pouring out when life squeezes you. Let me tell you something about the people who handle adversity well, the ones who go through the fire and come out on the other side, not just intact, but somehow better. Those people didn't get lucky. They didn't have some special gene for toughness that the rest of us don't have. What they had was a foundation that was poured long before the crisis ever showed up. They had years of small, invisible disciplines that nobody ever applauded, nobody ever rewarded, and nobody ever even noticed. They had the habit of doing what was right when it was easier to do what was convenient. They had the habit of keeping their composure when it would have been more satisfying to lose it. They had the habit of telling the truth when a lie would have been quicker and cleaner. And when the storm came, all of those habits rose to the surface and carried them through. Not because the storm made them strong, but because they had been getting strong all along in the quiet, private, unremarkable moments that nobody writes books about. So here's my challenge to you. Stop waiting for the storm to find out who you are. Start building now. Start today. Start with the small things. The way you manage your morning, the way you speak to the people in your household, the way you handle a minor frustration, the way you respond when someone cuts you off in traffic. Those moments feel insignificant, and that's exactly why they matter. Because the character you build in insignificant moments is the character you'll have access to in the moments that matter most. Pour the foundation while the sun is shining. Raise the walls while the sky is clear. Because the storm doesn't send a warning letter. It doesn't schedule an appointment. It just shows up. And when it does, the only thing that matters is what you built before it arrived. I want to talk to you now about something that too many people leave to chance, and that is the construction of their own character. Most people treat their character like it's something they were born with, something they inherited, something that was handed to them like eye color or height, fixed, permanent, and beyond their control. And that is one of the most expensive misunderstandings a person can carry through life. Because character is not inherited. You did not receive your character in some cosmic package at birth. Character is constructed deliberately and intentionally, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. And the moment you understand that, the moment you truly accept that you are the architect of your own character, everything changes. Because now you're no longer a victim of who you happen to be. Now you're a craftsman shaping who you're choosing to become. Think about what a sculptor does when they stand in front of a raw block of marble. They don't look at that block and say, well, I guess whatever's in there is what I'm stuck with. No, they study the marble. They picture what it could become. And then they pick up the chisel and they go to work. They chip away what doesn't belong. They refine what does. They make 1,000 small decisions. This stays, that goes. This needs more definition. That needs to be smoothed out. And none of those decisions are made carelessly, because the sculptor understands something that most people never grasp about their own lives. Every single stroke of the chisel matters. Every cut changes the shape of the final work. There are no neutral strokes. There are no insignificant decisions. Every chip either moves the piece closer to the masterpiece or further away from it. Your life is that block of marble, and you are holding the chisel right now, whether you realize it or not. Now here's what makes this both exciting and sobering at the same time. You choose what stays. Let me say that plainly so there's no confusion. You choose what stays in your character. The qualities that define you, your honesty, your patience, your discipline, your generosity, your courage, those are not accidents. They are choices that you made and then repeated until they became part of who you are. Nobody forced you to be honest. You chose honesty, and then you chose it again and again and again until honesty became something people could expect from you without even thinking about it. That's how character is built, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the repetition of 1,000 undramatic ones. You chose what stays, and by choosing it over and over, you cemented it into the foundation of who you are. But here's the other side of that coin, and it's just as important. You also choose what gets chipped away. There are things in every person's character that don't belong in the finished work. Habits that are holding you back, patterns of thinking that are keeping you small, tendencies that you've put up with for so long that you've started to believe they're permanent parts of who you are. But they're not permanent. They're just stone that hasn't been chiseled yet. The impatience you struggle with that can be chipped away. The tendency to cut corners that can be chipped away. The habit of making excuses instead of making progress that can be chipped away. But it won't chip itself. Stone doesn't remove itself from the sculpture. You have to pick up the chisel and do the deliberate, sometimes painful work of removing what doesn't serve the person you're trying to become. And I want to be straight with you about something. This work is not comfortable. Chiseling away parts of yourself that you've carried around for years, maybe decades, is not a pleasant afternoon activity. It requires you to look at yourself honestly, which most people would rather not do. It requires you to admit that some of the things you've been defending about yourself, that's just who I am. That's just how I was raised. I've always been this way, are not badges of identity, but blocks of stone that need to come off. And that admission takes courage, real courage, because it means accepting that you are not yet the finished product. It means accepting that there is work left to do. But I'm telling you, the willingness to accept that you are unfinished is not a weakness. It is the very definition of strength. The person who believes they have nothing left to improve is the person who has stopped growing. And a person who has stopped growing has started dying. Whether they know it or not, the construction of character happens in the ordinary hours of an ordinary day. It happens when you wake up in the morning and you have a choice. Do I keep the commitment I made to myself? Or do I hit the snooze button and talk myself out of it? That's a brick. That single choice is a brick in the structure of your character. It happens when someone wrongs you and you have a choice. Do I respond with dignity or do I respond with pettiness? That's a brick. It happens when you're handling money and you have a choice. Do I manage this wisely or do I spend it carelessly because it feels good in the moment? That's a brick. None of these moments feel historic when they're happening. None of them feel like they're shaping the course of your life, but they are. Every single one of them is adding to or subtracting from the structure you're building. And the structure you're building is the one you're going to live in for the rest of your life. Now, I want to address something that I think holds a lot of people back from this kind of deliberate self-construction, and it's the belief that character should come naturally. There's a popular idea out there that says, if you have to work at being a good person, then you're not really a good person. As if goodness should just flow out of you without any effort, like water from a spring. And I think that idea has done a lot of damage. Because the truth is, character always requires effort. It always requires intention. It always requires choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. And that choice never becomes completely effortless, no matter how long you've been making it. The person who has been honest for 40 years still faces moments where a lie would be more convenient. The person who has been disciplined for decades still faces mornings where the bed is warm and the alarm is unwelcome. The difference is not that the struggle goes away. The difference is that the commitment gets deeper. The sculptor who has been carving for 30 years still has to pick up the chisel every day. The work doesn't do itself. Mastery doesn't mean the work becomes unnecessary. It means the work becomes more refined. Here's something else I want you to think about. The finished work of your character is not for the museum. It's not a trophy to be displayed behind glass where people can admire it from a distance. The character you build is for your life. It's for the Tuesday morning conversation with your spouse. It's for the Friday afternoon decision at the office. It's for the Saturday when your child asks you a question that deserves an honest answer you'd rather not give. Your character is a working instrument, not a decorative piece. It has to function under the real conditions of a real life. which means it has to be built with real materials, not with good intentions, not with nice ideas, but with actual choices made under actual circumstances. The sculptor doesn't build the statue with thoughts about marble. The sculptor builds it with hands on the stone, and you don't build your character with thoughts about virtue. You build it with hands on the moments of your daily life. Legacy is where the construction of character reaches far beyond your own life. The character you build is not just for you. It's for your family. It's for the people who are watching you right now and learning from what you do, whether you've given them permission to or not. Your children are watching how you handle disappointment. They're watching how you treat people who can do nothing for you. They're watching whether your private behavior matches your public words. And they are constructing their own character, at least in part, based on the blueprint they see in yours. What you build in yourself becomes the model for what they build in themselves. That is a weight and a privilege that should make every one of us take this work more seriously than we ever have before. You are not just building for yourself. You are building for the people who come after you, the people who will carry your name and your example into rooms you'll never enter and into years you'll never see. So here we are at the fundamental question, and it's a question that deserves more than a quick answer. It deserves your attention for the rest of your days. The question is not whether you have the raw material. You do. Every person sitting in this room has the raw material to build a character worth admiring. You have the marble. It's right in front of you, and it's been there your whole life. The question is whether you'll pick up the chisel. The question is whether you'll do the slow, deliberate, sometimes uncomfortable work of shaping yourself into the person you know you're capable of becoming. Not the person the world says you should be, not the person your circumstances have tried to make you, but the person you would be if you took full responsibility for your own construction and refused to leave it to chance, to habit, or to the influence of whoever happens to be standing nearby. Pick up the chisel. Start today. Start with one choice, one brick, one stroke against the stone, and then do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because the masterpiece is not built in a day, but it is built one day at a time. And years from now, when you look back at the body of work that is your life, not your career, not your bank account, not your possessions, but your life, the sum total of who you became and what you stood for, you will be grateful that you didn't leave it to chance. You will be grateful that you treated your character with the same seriousness and care that the finest sculptor treats the finest marble. And the people who love you, the people who depend on you, the people who will carry your legacy forward after you're gone, they will be grateful too. Because the greatest gift you can give to the people in your life is not your money, not your time, not even your love, as important as those things are. The greatest gift you can give them is a character worth following. Build it with everything you've got, and it will outlast everything else you'll ever build.